It's fairly fashionable these days to try and model everything in terms of artificial intelligence because it's all the rave, but the reality is that artificial intelligence is created in the image of man. Should become clear. You can see the diagram. It's a fairly crude representation of what goes on, but nonetheless it should illustrate what I'm talking about. So we can be viewed as, in terms of artificial intelligence, let me just go through the main components in an AI. And this applies to robots as well. So the machine itself, in this case a human being, has some sensory apparatus. It can take inputs from the environment, which is absolutely crucial. If you can't take inputs, you don't know that there's a lion that's about to kill you and eat you. So you need sensory inputs. And the machine itself is also the thing that has what are called effectors. Effectors are basically your body, so if you do see a lion racing towards you, you're going to run away fairly quickly. That would be, so the sensory capability would be you see the lion. The effector would be that you utilize your muscles to run as fast as you can. So that's the AI talk, sensors and effectors. And that's all in the context of the machine itself. Now, unfortunately, life isn't as straightforward for most of us as that kind of scenario. We have emotions. So again, in terms of artificial intelligence, every AI is set a goal. So those little vacuum cleaner things, that vacuum cleaner robots or the floor cleaner robots that can scuttle around and clean the floor, maybe have a goal of cleaning the floor with least battery usage, something like that. Well, our goal is to survive and reproduce. You may feel that there's more to your life than that, and maybe there is, but generally speaking, those are the dominant drivers, the dominant goals that we have as human beings. To survive. So I've been through this stuff before, but go to work, get money, get some kind of social context, get shelter, and this is what we spend our day doing most days. Our mind actually, as you'll see shortly, is a slave of the machine, the body. Anyway, our emotions, which are the things that measure the status of this goal, how well are we surviving? How well are we reproducing? There's a whole story there. I'll go into it very briefly. It's a well-known fact in MGTOW circles, for example, men going their own way, men who've decided not to become wage slaves and all that kind of stuff. It's well known in those cycles that they can feel quite empty, lacking purpose, because our biology is programmed for survival and reproduction. And if men don't fulfill that purpose, they can feel like there's something missing. Not all men. Some men live quite happily on their own. But nonetheless, they can feel like that, and it's something that's talked about. So this programming, this goal that we're programmed with, both men and women, is to survive and reproduce, and that takes priority over pretty much everything. So we then have some measure of how we're doing in that kind of activity. So the emotions are nothing more than a measure of how well you're surviving and reproducing. If you've just lost your job, you're going to be a bit pissed off because that affects your survival to some extent. Similarly, if you get some fairly awful illness, that will affect you and make you feel pain. And pain is, unfortunately, our main driver. We're always trying to satisfy desires to ultimately achieve our goal of surviving and reproducing. And if we're not achieving that goal, then we feel emotional pain. The emotional pain is actually in the body, but that's a kind of barometer. It's what tells us how well things are going. So I've got lines connecting things here. These lines are at least, well, two-way between the body, the machine, and the emotions. The emotions in human beings and most mammals are seated in what's called the limbic system in the brain. You don't need to know all this stuff. All you need to know is there's a significant part of the brain that's dedicated to handling emotions. Fear, anxiety, all those kind of things. So, let's talk about a rat for a moment. The rat doesn't really use the problem-solving mind very much. I mean, it can do, and it can be programmed to do that. But typically, the main organ in the rat is its nose. And its nose is connected directly to its emotional brain. So, if it smells a cat, it runs away. There's no thinking. It's just the nose, the nerves in the nose connected straight to the emotional brain, and that is programmed to try and escape if it smells a rat. There's no thinking. There's no, oh, there's a cat, I better run away or something. It's just totally driven by this emotional thing, this measure of the goal status, because a cat obviously is a direct threat to life. Similarly, if it smells food, then it'll go looking for the food. Again, there's no thinking about it. The nerves in the nose are just connected directly to this limbic system, the emotional system in the brain. In fact, this is a very large part of the brain for rats. Anyway, coming to human beings, our emotional status usually gets passed on to what we can call the mind, or in the brain, the frontal cortex, the thinking bit of the brain. The bit that can manipulate symbols and images and things. So, we just learned that we've lost our job, so the emotional measure, the goal status, has gone negative. We're in pain. And so the mind then takes over. Oh, fuck, I've lost my job. I need to start looking through the newspaper for new jobs, blah, 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 applying for jobs. It's a problem solver. And it tries to sort out any problems that are occurring. And it can be, obviously very sophisticated in the way it does all this stuff, but nonetheless, that's its role. Now, for virtually all human beings, I say virtually all because there are some people who are not totally slaves to the body, but the mind typically is a slave to our emotional status in the body. So it sees what's going on, and then it spends all day applying for jobs and whatever else, or if we're unwell, it will sort out make arrangements for us to go see a doctor or someone. And there's a two-way connection between the emotions and the mind. If you've got to go to the dentist in a week's time and you've kind of forgotten about it, then you just start thinking about it, then maybe you get a little bit of fear because you don't like going to the dentist. So this is all exactly the same in an artificial intelligence system. There's a part of the AI that is measuring the goal status all the time. And if something's going wrong, there's another bit that can reprogram the behavior of the machine, which is the last part of this loop. So you've had a nasty shock by losing your job. The mind starts doing all its stuff and tells the body to go do some interviews and write applications and whatever else. I mean, it's not always all the way around this loop, because some of our processing is totally immediate, a little bit like the rat. So if we see a lion racing towards us, we don't stop and think, oh, this is a lion, is it harmful or not? No, that goes straight to the amygdala in the brain. And the amygdala just tells you to get the hell out of there. There's no thinking involved. It's just pure, people would say, instinct. But it's driven purely by the fear of the situation. So the amygdala is the center for anxiety and fear and anger and that kind of thing. And that feeds straight back to the reptilian brain and just says, get the hell out of there. So it doesn't always go all the way around this loop, but the power of human beings is that they have this problem-solving bit, which, again, in more sophisticated AIs, is the bit that is clever. So you can say with a fair degree of certainty that artificial intelligence has been modelled on the way human beings work, particularly because we have this problem-solving bit. Now, I mentioned that the mind here is really just a slave of the body via the emotions. And to a large extent it is. Most people spend all their life just making sure that they got a roof over their heads, they've got a full belly, they've got a sexual partner, they've got a social circle, all these things that kind of encourage survival. And there's nothing else going on. But you know, there are people around who wonder what the fuck this is all about. And that isn't activity that is related particularly to survival. You know, if you're, I don't know, I mean, I have to be careful because, so for example, religion, very often religion is about some fantastical ideas about survival after death, so it's still about survival. But if the thoughts are not particularly about survival, it's just about, well, you know, what the fuck is all this? Am I seeing reality? Blah, blah, blah. None of that really is geared towards survival. And in fact, you can spend a lot of time doing that stuff, and it doesn't help you one little bit. Get a more attractive mate, get a better job, all the things that survival and reproduction are about. But there are people around who feel inclined to question what all this life is about, and not tell themselves reassuring stories like they have a soul and it will survive after death, which is just, you know, more of the survival stuff. So anyway, we're fairly, in terms of this high-level view, we're fairly simple things to understand. We have a body that can sense the environment and can affect the environment. We have emotions that are measuring how we're surviving and reproducing all the time. And those emotions create pain, and if there's pleasure, the mind thinks, oh, I want more of that, and you know, we kind of do it until we're sick of it. If we're in pain, then the mind tries to address that through finding some kind of solution. And that's the way the whole thing works. From a point of view of a thinking person, that is a futile kind of existence, but that's the existence we've got. Anyway, I hope that is useful for some people, and you know, might lead on to other things.